Here we are.
It's been, what, you said 10 years?
It's been about 10 years
It doesn't
since
seem,
we started.
well, yeah, since we started the journey
Yeah,
with Lemons, Lemonade, and Life, but it doesn't seem like 10 years.
I know. It feels like
The
yesterday.
time went by so quickly.
It's true. But it's so nice to see you again. Oh my gosh.
All the work that we did and
Yeah.
traveling and healing all these folks,
Trying to get the word out.
trying to get the
Just
word out
about the information.
about the information, which is super important.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a time where people are so open to wanting to be healed. There's so much happening in the world. So I feel like the work that you were doing we missed you because it was much needed. You were like on this path and people were excited about hearing your story, and your story was super powerful. And I think it resonated with people. I think people had not heard the honesty and maybe had not heard a story like yours. And when they did, it kind of made them feel validated because a lot of times people just keep those stories to themselves and they don't know that other people are going through the similar things. So I
Yes.
think that that was a major, major benefit for so many people that are looking to be healed and looking to be comforted. And I think you provided that when you would talk about the book and talk about your journey to wellness.
Yeah.
You don't look like what you've been through,
Oh.
basically. And I think people look at you and they say like, wow, from your story, you've had a lot of non-preferred situations happen, but yet you've rose like a phoenix and you've been successful in your business. You've been successful author, mother, partner. So it's exciting that you're back on this journey to kind of help everyone and heal these people that are looking for what you have to offer.
Oh, thank you for that, my friend, my sister. Thank you. Yeah, talking about my story. I enjoy telling my story simply because of like what you said. If someone else can relate to it, if it sparks something, but it's not really intended to trigger anyone. But
No.
my point is that it kind of shows that we can get beyond our stories
Yeah.
and get through them. But I'll share a little bit about my story, and it actually kind of begins on a December day in 1990 when I was packing up to go home for the day. Now, what I used to do is I worked in Los Angeles during the week.
Right.
And my husband and my son and I lived 100 miles away from where I worked. So I would stay in Los Angeles during the week, and then I would go home on the weekends to be with my family. So it was this Friday afternoon, and I remember I was one of the last people who was in the office that day, and I was looking forward to getting home to see my family. And, my son was 2 years old at the time, and I hadn't seen him all week. And I was looking forward to getting home to see him and see how he may have changed during the week, et cetera.
Right.
And this is when I call it the voice chimed in. Now you have to understand this voice. This is a menacing voice that lived inside of my body, in my belly, since about the time I was 7 years old.
Okay.
And this voice constantly reminded me that I was no good. No matter what I did, no matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I tried to redeem myself, this voice would always remind me that I was no good and that the act was not working. It didn't
Right.
matter what I did, it was not so this was the relationship that I had from the time I was a little girl. And as the years went on, it grew and grew and grew. Now, this particular Friday afternoon, I'll never forget it, Chanel. I was putting a file away in a drawer. And I was putting it in there. And this voice said, now it was usually loud and bellowing and menacing and very monstrous, but this time it was a whisper. And it said to me, Janet, if you weren't here anymore, he wouldn't even miss you. Meant my son. My son wouldn't even miss me. And when the voice said that in a whisper, that was it. I was done. I was like, if he's not going to miss me, there's no reason for me to be here.
Right.
Because he was my only reason for staying on the planet. And I was like, well, if he's not going to miss me, there's no need for me to be here. And that's kind of when I snapped. And at that moment, The tears started flowing. Thank goodness I was in the office by myself. I was the last one there.
Right.
But the tears started flowing, and I knew I was going to kill myself. But because I just couldn't take the voice anymore. It had gotten me. So I didn't know whether I was going to do it there in the parking lot in my car, and I decided not to. Like the tears started flowing. I got into my car, tear-stained eyes. I'm fumbling through my purse, and I pull out the psychiatrist prescribed antidepressants that I was on at the time. And it was almost a full bottle's worth. And I thought, okay, well, this will do the trick. I'm going to take all these and I'm going to go to sleep. But I decided that I wanted to see my baby one last time before I did this. So here I am. I'm on the 10 freeway in Los Angeles on a Friday evening in traffic. Tear-stained eyes the whole way home, 100 miles. It's 100 miles one way to get to where we lived.
Where did you guys live?
We lived in the high desert.
In the desert, okay.
Yeah, high desert in California. So here I am on the 10 freeway, tears streaming down my face. And I was thinking about it, and there was a part of me that was comforted that I was finally going to be out of my pain. So it was like I was kind of looking at things from a different, it was like I was out of my body in a way as I was driving, but I thought about it like, what are people going to say when they found out that I killed myself? Because I was always, happy, helpful, kind. I always tried to be that. But they're like, what happened with Janet? Why is she not here, And I thought to myself, well, when they know my story, they're not going to blame me for doing this. And so
there was a valid reason.
Yes. And I thought about it on the way home, and I'm like, well, nobody's going to blame you once they realize what had happened. And I started kind of going through what those things were in my life. And it started when I was a little girl with the sexual abuse as a child. Sexual abuse by, multiple men, but I didn't tell my parents. It happened outside the home. I didn't tell them about it. I internalized it. I felt like it had to be my fault somehow. So all those years I was trying to redeem myself from being like an evil soul, just a naturally evil soul. So starting with the childhood sexual abuse, and then 6 months before this day in December 1990, it was actually in June of 1990, a stranger broke into my apartment on the first day that I lived there, and I was raped. By a stranger. So I had these bookends of victimization, these bookends of abuse, childhood sexual abuse on one end, rape on the other, sprinkled in there compulsive lying, shoplifting, obesity, bankruptcy, etc. All of these things, compulsive lying like crazy, all these years, all these decades. So I thought to myself, nobody's going to blame me. I hung on as best I could. But now, if my son isn't even going to miss me because the voice said he wasn't going to miss me, then I don't have any reason to be here anymore. There's a part of me that felt comforted, because I had so many secrets and so much pain. I couldn't do it anymore. So I go home, it's late, my husband's asleep, my son is asleep. And I peered in at him, and I thought to myself, I just want to see him up one more time, just hear his voice, see his smile. I was going to imprint that on my heart, and then I was going to go. So I stayed up all night, and the tears were still streaming down my face. I hadn't blinked in hours. It was the weirdest thing. And I think it was in the middle of the night, my husband got up and saw me in the other room, and I was just transfixed, looking straight forward, tears flowing down my face. And he was trying to wake me up. He was trying to talk to me. He saw the pills that I had next to me, a little tiny note that I was writing, and I was transfixed, looking straight ahead. And he cried, he begged. I mean, he saw that I was in real trouble. He begged, he pleaded, he yelled at me. And then he said something that I'll never forget. He said, Jan, if you do this, there are 2 people who will never recover. He said, number 1, your mother will never recover if you do this. And he and my mother didn't even get along.
I was going to say, did you ever think about in that moment, did you ever think about your parents, or did you ever think about your siblings? I know you thought about your son, but did you ever think about anybody, or were you just really focused on your son?
I was only focused on him. I couldn't even think of any other reason to live. But Fred said to me, he's like, if you do this, your mother will never recover. Number two, if you do this, our son will never recover. And he said, and if you do this to our son, I will hate you forever. And then he said my name a couple times. He said, Jan, Jan. And then he grabbed me by the shoulders, pulled me up, took me to the shower, pushed me in the shower, turned on the cold water. And that's when I woke up. That's when I said, oh shit, I can't leave, because I wasn't going to do that to my mother. And I sure as hell wasn't going to do that to my son. So that moment is when I decided that if I was going to live, I needed to live a life worth living.
Yep.
So at that moment in my clinical depression, I just said, okay, I'm committing to being here. So what does it mean for me to live a life worth living?
Yep.
So, I had gone to therapy before a couple of times. I was always a pleaser, but I figured I knew what to say to a therapist,
Right.
to kind of show that I was okay. I was reading a lot of books, a lot of philosophy, religions, self-help. I was always trying to heal myself because I knew something wasn't right with me.
Right.
But I just didn't know how, and I was still doing a lot of faking it. I was still doing a lot of lying and other things that I was having problems with. But at that moment, all bets were off. I'm like, I've got to figure this out. I've been on this journey for 20 years, but now I need to figure this out because my very life depended on it.
Right.
And that's when I rolled up my sleeves and I started to do what I call heal for real, because it was born out of desperation, but I needed to get that done. So that's the story that I tell. And I understand what trauma is. I understand what healing is, but I can tell that story now without breaking down, because I've healed so much with it that it no longer overtakes me, but it's also a part of my focus with my work. And having healed where I can be of service, which I love being of service, having healed that enables me to do what I do.
Correct.
And that's where the book came from after I went on that healing journey. So what I did was I shut down all the external things, all the comparisons that I used to make between me and other people, looking at magazines and things on TV, trying to be like that. And when I stopped shadowboxing with myself, and I'll describe that later, I started accepting exactly how I felt about everything without judgment. I started releasing the anger and hurt that I had hidden for decades, and I released it with harm to none, including myself. And I discovered that underneath the anger and the hurt, a quote by Khalil Gibran comes to mind. He said, "The deeper sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain." And I found this to be true. My joy is as deep as my pain used to be.
There's so many people that need this type of work, especially now that we've gone through the pandemic. People have lost so many people. People have lost their mind. They're experiencing mental illness. And like I said, it's so important for your work because people have a reference.
Yes, and based upon our experience with the pandemic, our nervous systems really took a big hit. You see, our midbrains thrive on certainty and predictability, and things became really uncertain and unpredictable around the world. So now that we are post-pandemic, I think we sure could take some deep breaths and remind our bodies when there is no immediate threat to its survival. And this renewed sense of certainty and predictability can help us calm our nervous systems. And to me, this is key to self-friendship. I have found that through self-friendship, all of my relationships have improved, whether they be business relationships, personal relationships, friendships. It's just positively impacted everything.
Yeah.
So self-friendship is key. And it's not easy because that means we have to go within ourselves. There's a quote by May Sarton, which I love, and she said, "We have to dare to be ourselves, however frightening or strange that self may prove to be." I know I was tormented for decades, but I learned how to transform it and now it's my passion, it's my joy. It's on a leash.
Right.
I'm in charge now.
Control.
But it's my passion that was hidden as a monster because I wasn't talking. I was keeping secrets, but I was a child of the 60s. People didn't talk about that stuff
Yeah.
then, but I'm really grateful that we're talking about it now.
I love this quote by Paul Shepard. He said, "There is a secret person undamaged in every individual." And I firmly believe that no matter what our non-preferred experiences may have been, we can reconnect with our undamaged selves and have profound self-friendship and enjoy healthy relationships with others that we imagine are possible.
It's healing time.
It's healing time.
Cheers.
Cheers.